The ruler on the table looked almost ridiculous. 1 inch of marked wood, a quiet line between doubt and embarrassment. The room was not loud yet. It was waiting, the way people wait when they believe a demonstration is about to fail politely. A few men smiled at the ruler. They did not understand that the smallest distance in the room would soon become the largest question. This was not a tournament floor. It was not a smoky arena filled with strangers hungry for violence. It was a private demonstration room in California, crowded with instructors, athletes, businessmen, and curious observers who wanted proof. Not philosophy, not legend, not stories from students. They wanted a simple answer to a simple challenge. Could Bruce Lee produce real power from almost no space? Power to them had a familiar shape. It meant a long swing, a planted stance, a heavy shoulder, a body gathering itself like a storm before release. Power needed room to announce itself. It needed distance, preparation, invisible effort. So when someone placed a hand close to a man's chest and spoke of force from 1 inch away, the room treated it like a trick. Bruce Lee stood near the front without defending the idea. That was often his way. He did not rush to rescue a concept before people had exposed their assumptions about it. He let the room reveal itself first. He watched their eyes move from the ruler to his hand, then from his hand to the larger man who had agreed to receive the strike. The volunteer was named Frank Mallory in this story, a fictional former football player with a broad chest, thick neck, and the relaxed confidence of a man who had been hit before. He was not cruel. He was not looking for humiliation. He simply did not believe a man Bruce's size could move him from such a short distance. Frank looked at the small gap between Bruce's fist and his chest and laughed once under his breath. It was not an insulting laugh. It was the laugh of a man trying to be polite while his body had already made a decision. His body had decided the demonstration was impossible. His mind was only searching for a respectful way to watch it fail. On the side of the room, another instructor crossed his arms and said what several others were thinking. If there is no distance, there is no power. That sentence became the wall Bruce had to walk through. Nobody meant it as poetry. They meant it as physics, common sense, and final judgment. Bruce turned toward him and asked, "Are you sure distance creates power?" The instructor did not answer quickly. Questions that sound simple can become dangerous when asked by someone who knows exactly where they are leading. Bruce did not wait for embarrassment. He lifted his hand and placed it lightly against Frank's chest. The room leaned forward, not because they believed, but because disbelief also wants a good view. Bruce's fist rested close enough that most people could see daylight between knuckle and shirt only because they were searching for it. 1 inch. Less than the width of 2 fingers. Too small for a punch, they thought. Too small for anything honest. Bruce's face remained calm. That calm did more to disturb the skeptics than any speech. A man preparing a trick often performs confidence. Bruce did not perform. He settled. His shoulders softened. His feet found the floor. His spine seemed to become quiet. Then the room realized he was not gathering power from the inch. He was bringing the entire body to it. Before he moved, Bruce asked Frank to hold his balance. Frank planted his feet and smiled. Several observers smiled with him. This was the moment they expected the myth to shrink. If Bruce failed, he would not fail violently. He would fail in a small, awkward way, with his fist close to a chest and the whole room pretending not to enjoy it. Bruce did not step back. He did not swing. He did not twist dramatically. The movement seemed too small to be called a strike. His wrist aligned, his elbow connected, his hip released, and the floor answered through him. The contact happened so quickly that several people saw the effect before they understood there had been a cause. Frank flew backward into the chair placed behind him. The chair scraped hard across the floor, tilted, and almost collapsed under him. The room made one sound together, a short, involuntary breath that had no opinion inside it. Opinions need time. The body reacts before pride can organize a defense. Frank sat there blinking, not injured, but deeply rearranged. His hands touched his own chest as if checking whether the space had betrayed him. He looked at Bruce, then at the ruler, then back at Bruce again. The laugh had disappeared from his face. It had not been beaten out of him. It had been educated. Bruce stepped back immediately. There was no celebration, no raised fist, no search for applause. He looked almost more interested in whether Frank was okay than in whether the room had finally understood. That mattered. The demonstration was not revenge against skepticism. It was an answer to a question people had not known how to ask properly. The instructor who had said distance creates power lowered his arms. He had not been humiliated publicly, but his certainty had been touched. That can feel worse to a proud teacher than a punch. A bruise fades while certainty tries to explain itself. He stared at Bruce's hand as if the answer might still be visible there. Again, someone whispered. The word moved through the room like a match in dry air. People wanted repetition because repetition protects them from magic. Once can be luck. Once can be timing. Once can be a man losing balance. But if the same impossible thing happens again, the mind must either grow or defend itself with desperation. Bruce heard the whisper and nodded. Frank stood carefully, embarrassed but curious now. This time he did not smile. That was the first change. Skepticism had not vanished, but it had learned to stand a little straighter. Bruce asked him to choose another stance if he wanted. Frank widened his base and braced harder. The room changed its own posture with him. Observers shifted closer. A camera lifted. Someone stopped chewing gum. The ruler stayed on the table, useless and important at the same time. It had measured the distance, but it had not measured structure, timing, relaxation, alignment, or intent. Bruce placed his fist 1 inch away again. This time the silence arrived before the strike. That was different from the first attempt. The first silence had been dismissive. The second silence was tense. It had doubt inside it, but the doubt was no longer comfortable. It had felt something it could not easily explain. Bruce moved. Frank went backward again, not as far, because this time he had braced for it. But bracing only proved the point in another way. The force still entered. His feet still lost authority over the floor. His face still changed from resistance to surprise in less than a second. A few people looked down at Bruce's feet. Others looked at his hips. One man watched the shoulder. Another watched the wrist. They were searching for the hidden part. That is what people do when a simple movement refuses to make sense. They try to break it into pieces, hoping one piece will confess. Bruce let them search. Then he spoke. Power is not only distance, he said. Distance is only one way to organize power. The sentence landed gently, but it cracked the room open. He was not denying physics. He was correcting their incomplete understanding of the body. He pointed to the floor first. If your fist is alone, it is small, he said. If your fist is connected, it carries more than itself. He demonstrated slowly, showing the line from foot to ankle, from knee to hip, from spine to shoulder, from elbow to wrist. The punch was no longer a punch, it was a chain. Several men nodded too quickly, the way people nod when they want to pretend they already knew the lesson. Bruce saw it and did not let them hide. Knowing the words is not knowing the body, he said. That made the room uncomfortable again, and useful discomfort was often where his teaching truly began. He asked a younger martial artist to place a hand on his shoulder, another to watch his hip, and another to watch his rear foot. Then he repeated the movement slowly without striking Frank. The observers felt the sequence travel through him. It was not a twitch. It was not a trick. It was organized release. Too much tension breaks the chain, Bruce said. Too little structure loses it. He relaxed his arm completely and let it collapse, showing weakness. Then he tensed everything and showed how stiffness killed speed. Finally, he returned to the middle, alive but not rigid. The room watched the difference become visible. This was the part many people missed when they reduced the demonstration to a legend. The 1-inch punch was not impressive only because Frank moved backward. Anyone can push a cooperative man if the setup is kind. The real lesson was that Bruce could make a small distance carry total commitment without telegraphing effort. An older boxer in the room asked the question that made Bruce smile faintly. So it is not a punch. It is body mechanics. Bruce answered, a punch without body mechanics is only an arm looking for help. The boxer laughed, not mockingly this time. He laughed because the line hurt in the exact place truth often hurts. Bruce invited him forward. The boxer's name was Ray Collins in this story. Gray at the temples, thick hands, a broken nose, in the cautious eyes of a man who had survived enough rounds to respect anything that moved strangely. Unlike Frank, Ray did not laugh at the inch. He looked at it as if it might be a doorway. Ray asked to feel the movement without being sent backward. Bruce agreed. He placed his fist near Ray's chest and released only a small portion of the force. Ray's eyes widened. He stepped back once by choice, not because he had been thrown. "That is not arm strength," he said. Bruce nodded. "Arm strength arrives late," Bruce said. "The body must arrive together." He clapped his hands once softly. "Together is power. Separate is noise." The room understood the phrase immediately because they had just watched a loud idea become quiet and a quiet movement become undeniable. A businessman near the back asked whether smaller people could use the same method. That question revealed another assumption in the room, that Bruce's power was mysterious because he was small. Bruce corrected it carefully. Small body, big body, it does not matter first. Connection matters. Timing matters. Relaxation matters. Honesty matters. Honesty seemed like a strange word for a physical demonstration, but Bruce used it deliberately. A dishonest movement lies to itself. It pretends to be relaxed while hiding fear. It pretends to be powerful while relying on tension. It pretends to be fast while announcing itself before it moves. Bruce showed them a dishonest punch. He exaggerated the shoulder, loaded the arm, tightened the face, and let everyone see the attack before it arrived. Several people laughed because they recognized themselves. Then he showed a cleaner version. The fist traveled less. The body said less. The result said more. Frank volunteered again, now with no trace of amusement. That changed the moral shape of the room. At first he had been the object of demonstration. Now he was becoming part of the lesson. He wanted to understand what had moved him. Curiosity had replaced disbelief, and curiosity is the door skepticism opens when it stops guarding its pride. Bruce positioned Frank carefully. "Do not help me," he said. "Do not resist foolishly either. Just stand honestly." The word honestly returned, and this time several people understood why. A demonstration becomes useless if the receiver performs either surrender or stubbornness. Truth requires both men to stop acting. Bruce placed the fist close again but did not strike. Instead, he asked the room what they saw. Answers came quickly. Fist, elbow, shoulder, stance, distance. Bruce listened, then asked what they did not see. That question stopped them. The most important parts of a movement are often the parts pride has not learned to watch. "Intent," Ray said finally. Bruce looked at him. "Yes." Then Bruce added, "and timing." He tapped Frank lightly, not enough to move him, only enough to mark the instant. The body is not a machine of parts. It is an event. If the event is late, power leaks. The phrase power leaks stayed in the room. It gave people a picture they could feel. Power leaking through stiff shoulders. Power leaking through lifted heels. Power leaking through fear, through anticipation, through the desperate need to look strong. Bruce did not make power sound mystical. He made weakness sound expensive. He demonstrated leakage by striking from 1 inch with bad alignment. Frank barely moved. Then Bruce adjusted only the foot and tried again. Frank shifted more. Bruce adjusted the hip. More movement. He adjusted the shoulder. More. Finally, he connected everything, and Frank went back into the chair again, laughing this time because he knew what had happened. That laugh changed the entire mood. It was not mockery now. It was astonishment relieved of pride. The room laughed with him, not at him. Bruce smiled for the first time, but briefly. He never allowed wonder to become entertainment for too long. Wonder was useful only if it led people back to training. "Do not chase demonstrations," he said. "Chase understanding." It was a warning disguised as advice. He knew some would leave the room telling people about the 1-inch punch as if it were a magic trick. Others would imitate the shape and miss the substance. The danger of a famous demonstration is that fame freezes it into a pose. Bruce hated poses. He believed living movement had to adapt, breathe, and remain honest under changing pressure. A 1-inch punch was not the point. The point was that distance, like style, like tradition, like size, was only one variable. If a man worshipped the variable, He lost the whole equation. The instructor who had challenged the idea earlier stepped forward. His name was Alan Pierce in this story, a hard-faced karate man who valued impact above explanation. If this works, he said, then why do we train long strikes at all? It was a good question now. Earlier, it would have been a trap. Now it was inquiry. Bruce answered with respect. Because distance also teaches. A long strike teaches reach, commitment, balance, and recovery. But if you need distance to have power, then distance owns you. Alan blinked at that. The sentence entered him slowly. He had not been told his training was wrong. He had been told not to become dependent on it. That distinction mattered. Bruce did not want to replace one prison with another. He was not saying every punch should be 1 inch. He was saying power should not disappear when the distance disappears. A fighter must remain himself at long range, close range, and in the terrifying space where there is almost no room to begin. Ray the boxer nodded. Inside fighting, he said. Bruce pointed at him lightly. Yes, but even closer. Ray understood. In boxing, close range can hide danger because the arms seem jammed. Bruce was speaking about the place where most people think nothing can be born. He was saying birth still happens there if the body's connected. A young student near the door asked whether the punch could be learned quickly. The room smiled because everyone wanted the answer and feared it. Bruce did not make it easy. You can learn the idea quickly, he said. Your body will take longer to stop lying. That sentence carried the weight of years. The body lies through habit. It lies by tightening too soon, moving too much, breathing too high, reaching for applause, protecting the ego, and copying shapes without understanding. Bruce's own body had become honest only through brutal repetition, correction, failure, and refusal to accept pretty movement as enough. He showed them a drill, nothing dramatic. Feet rooted, spine aligned, elbow heavy, wrist alive, shoulder relaxed. The movement looked almost boring without the result attached to it. That was another lesson. Real training often looks boring to people who only respect performance. But performance is the flower. Training is the root. For 10 minutes, the room practiced tiny releases. Big men became clumsy. Experienced fighters became beginners. The businessman discovered his shoulders rose every time he tried to be strong. Alan discovered his hip fired late. Ray discovered his boxing balance helped him, but his old injuries made one side leak power. Bruce corrected without cruelty. He could be intense, but intensity was not the same as contempt. He touched elbows, adjusted feet, moved shoulders down, told people to breathe, told them to stop trying so hard. That last instruction frustrated them most. Men who worship effort often feel insulted when told effort is in the wrong place. Frank tried to reproduce the strike and barely moved a practice pad. He looked embarrassed. Bruce shook his head. Good, he said. Frank frowned. Bruce explained, now you know you do not know. That is progress. The room laughed softly because the truth was blunt, but Frank accepted it. The demonstration had turned into a workshop, and the workshop had turned into something deeper. At first, the room wanted proof that Bruce Lee was powerful. Now the room was discovering how much of its own power had been trapped by tension, habit, and the need to look powerful before actually being useful. That was one of Bruce's gifts as a teacher. He could take an impressive moment and pull it backward into principle. Many people stop at applause. Bruce moved past applause quickly because applause does not train the nervous system. Applause can even become poison if a man begins choosing movements that win admiration over movements that reveal truth. Alan asked to receive the real strike. The room sensed pride returning, but in a different form. It was not mocking pride now. It was testing pride, the kind a serious martial artist sometimes needs to turn belief into experience. Bruce studied him for a moment and agreed. Alan stood against the chair with his jaw tight. Relax, Antoner, Bruce said. Alan said he was relaxed. Bruce looked at his shoulders. Everyone else looked too. Alan realized the lie before Bruce named it. He breathed out, lowered his shoulders, and nodded. The room had begun learning to see tension like a visible object. Bruce placed the fist near Alan's chest. This time the room did not smile. It watched. The inch had become sacred, not because it was mystical, but because it had become the place where excuses went to die. Bruce released. Alan flew back into the chair, eyes wide, one hand grabbing the seat to keep it from tipping. He stood up slowly and did not speak for several seconds. Then he bowed. Not deeply, not dramatically, but enough. Bruce returned the bow. The room felt the difference between submission and respect. Submission lowers a man because he has no choice. Respect rises from recognition. I understand distance differently now, Alan said. Bruce answered, then the demonstration is finished. That surprised everyone. They expected more. More force, more proof, more spectacle. But Bruce had a habit of ending a thing once the point had arrived. Continuing after truth appears can turn truth back into performance. Someone objected that the cameras had not captured the best angle. Bruce shrugged. Then they missed it, he said. It sounded harsh, but it was not arrogance. It was a refusal to make the lesson serve the camera. For Bruce, reality came first. The camera could follow if it was lucky. That attitude would later help explain why people argued about what they had seen. Some said the volunteer jumped. Some said the chair made it dramatic. Some said it was body mechanics, not fighting. Some said it was a trick. The arguments missed the point. The room had not been changed by a chair. It had been changed by contact with a principle. A principle does not need everyone to believe in it. It only needs to work when tested honestly. Bruce knew that. He had spent too much of his life confronting men who loved names, ranks, and styles more than function. The one-inch punch was a beautiful insult to all unnecessary distance, physical, mental, and philosophical. He spoke then about efficiency. The shortest path is not always the straightest line, he said. It is the line with the least waste. Ray nodded like a boxer hearing old truth in a new language. Alan listened like a man repairing a wall in his mind brick by brick. Bruce explained that waste hides everywhere. It hides in the face before the punch. It hides in the shoulder before the hand moves. It hides in the breath held too long. It hides in the extra step taken because confidence needs drama. Remove the waste, and the body becomes quieter. A quieter body arrives sooner. The businessman asked if that was why Bruce seemed faster than other men. Bruce considered the question. Sometimes speed is not moving faster, he said. Sometimes speed is removing what made you late. The room absorbed that slowly. It sounded like fighting, but it also sounded like life. Frank, still rubbing his chest lightly, said, it felt like the floor hit me. Bruce smiled. Good, he said. That is closer. The room laughed again, warmly this time. Frank's description was imperfect, but useful. He had not felt an arm. He had felt connection arriving through a small door. Bruce asked everyone to stand still for a moment. No punches, no demonstrations, just standing. He walked between them and corrected posture with small touches. He pressed a shoulder down here, moved a foot there, tilted a chin slightly. The room discovered that stillness could be more revealing than movement. If you cannot stand honestly, Bruce said, you cannot strike honestly. That line quieted the room again. It was the kind of sentence that follows a person home. Many had come to see power as impact. Bruce was showing them power as alignment before impact, attention before alignment, and honesty before attention. The one-inch punch then became less like a stun and more like a mirror. It showed every man how much he expected power to look like struggle. It showed how badly people underestimate preparation that has become invisible. It showed that the smallest visible movement can contain years no camera will ever capture. That is why legends around Bruce Lee are easy to misunderstand. People remember the spectacular result because the result is easy to tell. A man flew backward, a chair moved. The room gasped. But the deeper story is less convenient. The result was the last page of a book written through endless training. Bruce did not become dangerous because he knew a secret. He became dangerous because he refused to let any part of himself remain asleep. Feet, hips, spine, shoulders, breath, eyes, timing, intent. Each part had to report honestly to the whole. The punch was small only to people measuring distance instead of integration. Ray asked whether the same idea applied to defense. Bruce nodded immediately. Everything, he said. If you disconnect, you are late. If you tense, you are late. If you decide after the attack begins, you are already late. Several martial artists looked at the floor. They had felt that lateness before. Bruce demonstrated with a light touch to Ray's jab. The movement was tiny. Ray's glove hand drifted offline, and Bruce's other hand appeared near his ribs. Again, no damage. Again, the ending was clear. Ray smiled with the humility of a real fighter. Real fighters appreciate truth even when it embarrasses them. Alan watched Ray smile and seemed to understand something about pride. Pride does not always look like boasting. Sometimes it looks like refusing to enjoy another man's skill because it threatens your own. Alan allowed himself to appreciate what Bruce had done. That was a small victory no audience would clap for. The workshop ended later than planned. Nobody complained. The chairs had been moved, the ruler forgotten on the table, the floor marked with small scuffs where men had lost balance and gained information. Bruce put his jacket back on slowly. The room felt full, not with noise, but with unfinished practice. Before leaving, he picked up the ruler. For a second, people thought he might make a final joke. Instead, he placed it back on the table and said, "This measured distance. It did not measure readiness." That sentence gave the ruler a new meaning. It was no longer a challenge. It was evidence of how small their question had been. Frank approached him near the door. "I thought you were going to embarrass me," he admitted. Bruce shook his head. "You helped the room learn," he said. Frank looked relieved, then proud in a better way. There are kinds of pride that close the hand and kinds that open it. Alan came next. He did not apologize dramatically. He simply said, "I was too sure." Bruce answered, "Then be sure about training." It was not comfort exactly. Bruce was not a man who softened every edge, but he gave Alan a direction instead of leaving him trapped inside shame. Ray stayed behind with the young student, repeating the phrase about removing what made you late. He rolled it around like a boxer testing a new rhythm. The student asked if that meant doing less. Ray shook his head. "No," he said. "It means wasting less." Bruce heard him and smiled faintly. Outside, the California night had cooled. Cars moved along the street. A neon sign buzzed somewhere across the road. Nothing about the city had changed because one man moved another from 1 inch away. Yet inside the people who saw it clearly, something had shifted. Their definition of power had become smaller and larger at the same time. Smaller because power no longer needed a large gesture to prove itself. Larger because power now included structure, timing, humility, honesty, and connection. A person who understands only impact sees the final flash. A person who understands connection sees the entire storm gathered quietly behind it. This is why the story of the 1 inch punch has survived. Not because it is the greatest strike ever thrown, and not because it should become a circus trick copied without understanding. It survives because it compresses Bruce Lee's entire philosophy into a space so small the skeptical mind cannot hide inside distance. Be direct. Remove waste. Express honestly. Do not be trapped by style, size, distance, or appearance. Do not mistake effort for effectiveness. Do not worship what looks powerful while ignoring what actually works. In 1 inch, Bruce made those ideas physical enough for a room to feel them. The room had asked him to prove power. But by the end, power was not the only thing he had proven. He had proven how incomplete their question was. They had asked how much force could fit inside 1 inch. Bruce answered by showing how much training, awareness, and discipline could fit inside one human body. That is the difference between a trick and a legacy. A trick ends when the audience figures out how it works. A legacy deepens when understanding it demands more training from the person who saw it. The 1 inch punch was not less impressive when explained. It became more impressive because explanation revealed the work behind it. Years later, people would repeat the story with different details. The chair would move farther. The room would grow larger. The volunteer would become bigger, heavier, more skeptical. That happens with legends. But beneath the exaggerations, the useful truth remains. Bruce Lee used a tiny distance to expose a huge misunderstanding. He showed that a man can be close and still dangerous, relaxed and still explosive, small and still connected to the floor like a living spring. He showed that the visible moment is only the tip of the training. And he showed that doubt is not the enemy if doubt is willing to become attention. The enemy is certainty that refuses contact. The instructor who said distance creates power was not foolish because he doubted. He was foolish only when he believed the sentence was complete. Bruce did not punish doubt. He completed it. That is why the best witnesses left with questions, not slogans. They asked different questions afterward. Where does my power leak? What do I announce before I move? Am I trying to look strong, or am I connected enough to be useful? Do I understand the distance I am in, or do I only function in the distance I prefer? Those questions are more valuable than applause. They turn a demonstration into practice. They turn admiration into responsibility. Bruce Lee did not want spectators who worshipped him from a safe distance. He wanted people to wake up inside their own bodies. The one-inch punch was a knock on that door. And maybe that is why the ruler matters so much in the story. It reminds us how easily people measure the wrong thing. They measured the inch, but not the years. They measured the gap, but not the connection. They measured the fist, but not the discipline behind the fist. A ruler can tell you how far the hand travels. It cannot tell you how honestly the body has been trained. It cannot measure relaxation earned through failure. It cannot measure timing sharpened by correction. It cannot measure the courage to remove wasted movement until nothing remains except what must happen. Bruce's power did not come from wanting to look powerful. It came from refusing to lie. That refusal shaped his movement, his teaching, his philosophy, and his presence. When the room asked for proof, he gave them more than impact. He gave them a visible argument against every unnecessary thing. The chair scrape eventually faded. Frank's chest stopped aching. The observers went home. The ruler probably returned to a drawer or stayed forgotten on a table. But the image remained. Bruce Lee standing close enough that power should have been impossible, then proving that impossibility had been hiding inside their assumptions. That image still works because everyone has a version of that inch, a place where we think there is not enough room to begin, not enough time, not enough size, not enough advantage, not enough distance. Bruce's lesson does not say circumstances are irrelevant. It says connection can change what a circumstance means. 1 inch is not much space, but space is not the only measure of possibility. Sometimes the missing distance is inside the body. Sometimes it is inside attention. Sometimes it is inside the courage to stop performing strength and start building it correctly. Bruce Lee turned 1 inch into a question every serious student still has to answer. The question is not, can you move someone from 1 inch away? That is too small. The better question is, where are you disconnected? Where are you late? Where are you wasting motion to protect your ego? Where are you measuring the ruler instead of the truth? By the time Bruce left that room, nobody looked at the ruler the same way. Nobody looked at his size the same way. And if they were honest, nobody looked at their own power the same way. They had asked him to prove strength. He used 1 inch to prove that strength begins long before the hand moves. The most important witnesses were not the ones who told the story later with the loudest voices. They were the ones who trained differently the next morning. Alan lowering his shoulders before a strike. Ray feeling his feet before a jab. Frank standing with new respect for small movements. Quiet changes, invisible to cameras, but real. That is how Bruce Lee's influence often traveled. Not only through films, posters, and famous demonstrations, but through tiny corrections that entered other bodies. A phrase here, a touch there. A humiliating assumption turned into a useful question. The legend became powerful because the method kept moving after the room emptied. If the story has a moral, it is not that 1 punch is magic. Magic asks you to believe. Bruce asked people to train. The moral is that real power is usually less theatrical than the ego wants it to be. It is built quietly, connected honestly, and released without needing a long runway. That is why the 1 inch punch remains more than a stunt. It is a symbol of compressed discipline. Everything unnecessary removed. Everything useful connected. No wasted speech, no wasted anger, no wasted distance. Just a man, a line on a ruler, a skeptical room, and a truth that arrived before anyone had time to laugh. So remember the room before the strike. The smiles, the folded arms, the polite disbelief, the ruler on the table. Then remember the room after, the chair scraping, the silence, the questions, the men looking down at their own feet. That transformation was the real impact. Bruce Lee did not merely move a man backward, he moved an idea forward. He took power out of the theater of size and placed it inside connection. He took distance away as an excuse. He showed that the smallest space can reveal the largest truth when the body behind it has been trained to speak honestly. The ruler on the table measured 1 inch. The room learned that 1 inch can hold a lifetime of work. That night also changed the way the witnesses described strength. Before they spoke of weight, reach, speed, and how far a fist could travel before impact. Afterward, they spoke of connection, timing, and the strange quiet that entered Bruce's body before release. The language of the room became smaller, sharper, and more honest. Some of them still argued later, because people often argue hardest when they have been forced to reconsider themselves. But even the arguments had changed. They no longer asked whether power needed distance. They asked how power survived without it. That was progress. The question had moved closer to truth. Bruce would not have wanted the demonstration treated like a sacred object. A sacred object can become another prison. He wanted the principle alive, tested, corrected, and adapted. The 1 inch punch was not a museum piece. It was a door. A serious student was supposed to walk through it, not kneel in front of it. If Frank remembered anything most clearly, it was not the impact. It was Bruce checking on him afterward. That detail matters because it separates skill from cruelty. Power without care becomes vanity. Care without power can become helplessness. Bruce's rare gift was making both exist in the same moment. The ruler remained on the table until the room emptied. Nobody needed it anymore, but nobody moved it. It had become a witness. At the beginning, it represented the limits of what the room believed possible. At the end, it represented how badly people can misunderstand a small thing when they measure only its surface. This is the kind of story that keeps Bruce Lee alive in martial arts memory. Not because every detail is repeated the same way, but because the lesson keeps returning with force. Where others saw a tiny gap, he saw a complete body. Where others saw no room, he saw enough room for truth. And that is why 1 inch still feels larger than it should. It contains doubt, discipline, laughter, impact, humility, and a room of people realizing that power had never been only about distance. Bruce Lee did not need a long runway to prove himself. He needed 1 honest inch and everything behind it.